Welcome, viewers, to your award-winning Let's Talk America with host Shayna Thornton radio show. Of course, I'm Shayna, on-air host and executive producer for the program. And you are watching our edition of Real Talk. It's our video chat series where we sit down with the best and the brightest in the evenings to bring you some of the best trending topics out there. And tonight, I am so excited have one of my dear friends on with us. She is board certified, acclaimed pediatrician, the one and only Atlanta-based Dr. Monica Moore. Dr. Moore, welcome back to Let's Talk America.
Thank you so much, Shayna, for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Super excited to have you on tonight. And we've got a great topic in mind. We're talking about healthy eating for our children and for the grown-ups in the family, which is not always easy to achieve. You know, here on Real Talk, we always love getting the best advocacy and the best education and awareness that you're going to bring. But Dr. Monica, we also have a tradition where we want to know more about you. Now, I know your CV and resume is super impressive. We know all of that. But right now, we want to horn in on you personally. What allows you to really push what you do as a board certified pediatrician? I know you focus on so many different areas, but you are so committed to trying to combat obesity in our young children. Why is that so important to you on a personal level?
It's very important, Shayna. For one of the things that's really important to me as a board certified pediatrician is I always want to empower, educate, and also engage with my families. And so many of the conversations are centered around the child's healthy eating habits. And so I always want to have that conversation about modeling healthy behaviors. And as you may know, last month was Childhood Obesity Awareness Month, and childhood obesity in the United States has really become a very alarming number. From ages 2 to 19% of the US population of that age have a diagnosis of obesity. And so it is really important for me to be able to educate my families about the importance of healthy behaviors so that we can combat that disease, because it is preventable. We want to talk about interventions and we want to talk about prevention.
I love it. And intervention and prevention, two big words, the I and the P word, that makes all the difference. Now, right now, let's dive into this important conversation. There, I say, mom or busy dad out there watching you, and they're saying it's so true, right? They don't want their child to perhaps repeat the obesity that auntie or grandmother, or even mom has herself. But they're saying, I'm busy. I work a lot. By the time I pick them up from school or even after school, and I run them back and forth from soccer to gymnastics or dance or just working on homework, it can be a lot to want to eat healthy. And most of people, you know this, we tend to choose what's easy and convenient, Dr. Monica. And sometimes that's fast food. And not to beat up on the fast food industry, but the calories are a little extra. The frying food doesn't help that. The carbohydrates are through the roof. There's a lot of processing food that comes with the quickness and the convenience. And I've had conversations with you before on this program and offline where you talk about the overprocessed foods really putting on the unhealthy, unwanted weight onto our children and mom and dad. How do you balance all of that by still wanting to be a good mom and at least have a conversation or two in the evenings while trying to figure out what's good and healthy to cook?
Right. It's a very challenging conversation, Shayna, and one that I definitely make sure that I have with my families, and being realistic and being transparent and recognizing it's not easy, right? It's definitely something that we have to prioritize. And so for me, it's important to prioritize what's important to me. And my family is extremely important to me. And so longevity of life, having a lot of energy, being able to spend time with my family in a healthy way and seeing them thrive. We know that specifically in the African-American population, there is so much comorbidities with obesity. And we talk about COVID a lot. We talked about how those populations of individuals that had the comorbidities, the high blood pressure, diabetes, as well as high blood pressure, were more susceptible to, major complications and death. And so I often will have that conversation about, is it important for your family to be healthy? And are you able to make a few adjustments and be intentional? I think a lot of it centers around being very intentional about what we do and modeling that behavior, because we know that our children will emulate the things that they see. So if they see mom and dad eating unhealthy, okay, it's okay for me to do the same. See mom and dad being sedentary, okay, I don't have to get up and be physically active. So it's definitely something that I want the entire family Not just one person. I never single out one particular person in the family. We always talk about doing it together.
Yeah.
Again, we talked about last month being Childhood Obesity Awareness Month, but this month is Eat Better, Eat Together. And so having as a family affair, I think, so many conversations occur around the kitchen table. We talk about being undistracted, though, turning off the television, turning off the video games, so that we can use that time to really have conversations. How was your day? Using open-ended questions, I'll say, instead of just saying, how are you? What was the most important part of your day and why? And eating together and cooking together. So the intentionality is important because, like you said, if you have to go to soccer and then swim and then golf, and you haven't thought about and been intentional about preparing food ahead of time, you are going to go ahead and get the foods, like you said before, that are highly processed. And we know that is the risk factors for obesity are multifactorial, but the ultra processed foods as well as the added sugars play a huge factor in the obesity rate.
Yeah, such great points you're making. Viewers, you are watching the award-winning Real Talk produced by Let's Talk America Radio. I'm Shana Thornton, on with the one and only board-certified Atlanta-based pediatrician, Dr. Monica Moore, and she is breaking down childhood obesity and giving us realistic information and tips that's coming up shortly about how to eat healthy. Dr. Monica, before we get into your cooking demo, I have to ask you something. You mentioned about as parents emulating what is good for our children, rather to emulate, and we setting that example. But I have a question for you, and I have spoken with so many dietitians, so many nutritional experts and scientists and researchers that have said the truth of the matter is sugar is addictive. Right. And they're saying there have been some studies or examples where they have proven that sugar is more addictive, perhaps, than heroin or cocaine. And when we put it like that, we're talking about food being an addiction for so many people. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about our children, right? You're a mother, I'm a mother, you're a pediatrician, so nobody knows this more than anyone out there than you would. But when children are eating the baby food or the processed food, there's a different reaction. The very first time they drink a sweet tea or they have a piece of the icing on their first birthday cake, there's a reaction that really reminds all of us that once they hit that type of sugar high, there is a difference, if you will. Talk to us about that, because there's more and more research that's pointing to the fact that sugar and certain ingredients in processed foods can be addictive, and where you almost yearn or want that type of processed food, the junk food, if you will. So many of us are guilty of it. You're looking at someone that may be guilty of that as well. How do we handle that with our children? Because as you know, children go through picky stages on top of all of that, what I just reviewed, where they just want pizza, they just want potato chips. Help us out. What do you do when you have a toddler or even an adolescent, a 15-year-old that wants what they want, and having that balanced meal of an apple perhaps and kale doesn't really mesh for them?
Right. You make a lot of points. And like I spoke before about the risk factors for diabetes being so multifactorial, there's a lot of research that has shown that the early introduction of complementary foods, that means not, introducing foods at a younger age, younger than 13 weeks, can lead to obesity. And specifically if children are giving sugary foods prior to that age or even continuing. And so you make a great point about that. And we talk about complex versus simple sugars. So your simple sugars are your soda, your snacks, a lot of your cereal. So those foods are broken down really quickly, cause an immediate sugar rush or glucose, medical terminology for that. And like you said, it does then increase your desire for more of that particular thing because of what kind of feeling it gave you, versus your complex sugars. So are more like your whole fruits, your whole grains, your vegetables, your beans. They're more filling. They take a little bit longer to digest. And so you're not having that imbalance in the sugar level. So it's really important. I'm glad that you spoke about that, because that is something that we're seeing so much. And it's an easy go-to, I'll have conversations with my parents and ask about this juice intake. And some of the kids are having a lot of juice. I'll just put it that way. And so I'll immediately say they don't need it, so those little infants, with the juice in the bottle, those types of things that we'll oftentimes see, is definitely something that has scientifically been proven that will increase the likelihood of obesity. And so when a person, and a sugar craving is, that's a normal, that happens. So what do we do about that? So then we have the healthy alternative. And so that's why I always tell families, having that healthy alternative readily available at the house so that you're not going to the non-healthy option. So when you're going to the grocery store, we're in the produce section, we're getting a
Yeah.
fresh piece of fruit. We're getting those
Yeah.
things. And so that will be the go-to. So we'll open up the refrigerator. There's nothing in there. Oh, yes, there is something in
Yes.
there. And
Good
that
point.
something in there is something that's healthy. And so for a lot of people, it may not be their go-to, and it may not have been it's a learned behavior that we have to try to change those habits and make healthier lifestyle habits. And I think that that's something that we have to continue to have the conversation around, because it is something that we're seeing a lot more readily.
I want to talk about what you said, morbidity. You brought that up, and we're talking about what that means. So, heart attack or stroke, or things that diabetes can ultimately help lead to, if you will, right? I once read a study that said, it's not necessarily type 2 diabetes that is fatal, but what it helps create and promote. And those are those events: stroke, heart attack, other things, kidney failure, perhaps, when it's uncontrolled. So for many people, they hear those things and they say, well, how does it translate? And I have a very good friend who is a fitness health advocate, and she always says, what is your why? And I think this is the perfect time, Dr. Monica, for you to explain for our viewing audience, when we talk about a stroke or heart attack, and obviously that can be more common, if you will, the more we get older, right? Because children don't stay children forever. They do grow up, they become our age and older. What does it mean when we're talking about the trickle down domino effect of obesity and how stroke and heart attack affects that? I mean, make a real case right now, because so many times I think people hear those things and they say, well, that's not going to happen to me. That's not going to happen to me. But if we really think about it, we all know someone that a stroke or heart attack happened to. The reason why we want to keep our weight under control, the reason why we want to manage those blood sugars and take diabetes 1 or 2 very serious and not dismiss it, and hypertension and dyslipidemia and high cholesterol as well. We want to take it all serious, but make the case, what does it translate to? And make also the obvious point that not everyone survives it. Even if you do survive it, it can be often a very difficult road, and it can be fatal for some.
So there are a number of obesity related complications. And so I think maybe I'm not sure that's kind of the question that you were asking, what they are. And unfortunately, they are seen in the child and the adolescent population. So we oftentimes will think about them just in the adult population, but unfortunately, we are seeing it. I mean, I have had so many children. Never would have thought as a pediatrician that we would be diagnosing pre-diabetes as well as diabetes. And then you think about type 1 diabetes in the child and adolescent population, but type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes is something that we're seeing a lot of. And so those are some of the things that are related to obesity. Addition to that, hypertension or high blood pressure is seen in individuals with obesity, as well as sleep-related issues. And I'll speak a little bit about how sleep is related to obesity, as well as just some mobility issues. I've had conversations with some families recently that their 12-year-old son with obesity was having a challenge getting up the stairs. And by the time he got up the stairs, he was having a hard time breathing. So as a parent, that just really breaks at your heartstring to see that your pre-adolescent or your adolescent child is not able to function in the manner that a child should be able to run around and have fun and play, because their obesity is preventing them from being able to function. And so musculoskeletal issues can be seen with diabetes. We have what's called precocious puberty, or puberty happening earlier than anticipated because of obesity. So there are a myriad of diagnoses that we are seeing related to obesity, and they are real.